How posture reprograms the mind. She stood at the mirror that morning, shoulders forward, eyes avoiding her own reflection. It wasn't vanity. It was something deeper, like her body had learned to apologize for taking up space. For months, she'd been chasing productivity, better habits, cleaner routines. But no matter how many morning pages she wrote or podcasts she consumed, something felt stuck. Like she was building a life on unstable ground. Then she noticed something strange. On the days she felt small, anxious, hesitant, unsure, her posture collapsed first. Her chest caved, her head dropped forward, her breath grew shallow, and her thoughts followed the same pattern. Doubt, overthinking, a quiet sense of falling behind. But on rare mornings when she felt aligned, literally standing taller, everything shifted. Her voice felt clearer. Decisions came easier. She didn't second-guess herself as much. It wasn't confidence, it was something more fundamental. She started to wonder, what if the body wasn't just reflecting the mind, but actively shaping it? What if posture wasn't cosmetic at all? Most of us think of posture as physical. Stand up straight, don't slouch, pull your shoulders back. We treat it like etiquette, something our parents nagged us about, something that matters more in photos than in real life. But neuroscience tells a different story. Your body and brain are in constant conversation, and posture is one of the loudest signals your nervous system receives every single second. When you collapse forward, your diaphragm compresses. Oxygen intake drops. Your brain interprets this as a threat response. Cortisol rises. Focus narrows. You begin scanning for danger, even when there is none. Researchers at Harvard found that adopting an open, expansive posture for just 2 minutes increases testosterone and decreases cortisol, hormones linked to confidence and stress regulation. But it goes further than that. Your posture doesn't just influence how you feel, it changes how you think. She didn't believe it at first. It sounded too simple, too physical for something as complex as anxiety or self-doubt, but she started testing it. On mornings when her chest felt tight and her thoughts spiraled, she'd pause, stand, lengthen her spine, roll her shoulders back, breathe into her ribs, and something softened. Not immediately, not like flipping a switch, but gradually, like turning up the dial on a radio station that had been full of static. Her thoughts didn't disappear, but they stopped looping. They moved through her instead of circling endlessly. She felt less like she was bracing for impact. What surprised her most wasn't the calm, it was the clarity. When her posture opened, her perspective did too. Problems that felt insurmountable suddenly had options. Conversations she'd been avoiding felt manageable. It was like her body had been holding her hostage, and she didn't even know it. Psychologists call this embodied cognition, the idea that our physical state directly shapes our mental experience. Your brain doesn't just live in your head, it's distributed throughout your entire body. Every muscle, every joint, every breath sends feedback to your central nervous system, and your posture is one of the most consistent signals your brain receives about safety, status, and readiness. When you hunch, your brain reads, withdraw, protect, stay small. When you align, it reads, engage, expand, move forward. This isn't metaphor, it's biology. But here's where it gets tricky. You can't just stand up straight and expect everything to change. Because most of us have spent years, sometimes decades, training our bodies into patterns of collapse, sitting at desks, staring at screens, carrying stress in our shoulders, holding our breath during hard conversations. Our posture isn't just physical, it's emotional, it's historical. Every unprocessed feeling, every moment we swallowed our voice, every time we made ourselves smaller to fit someone else's expectations, our body remembers, and it holds the shape of those memories. She realized this one afternoon, sitting at her desk. Her shoulders were up by her ears. Her jaw was clenched, her breath was shallow and rapid. She wasn't stressed about anything specific, she was just existing, and her body was reacting like it was under siege. That's when it clicked. Her posture wasn't the problem, it was the symptom. The real question wasn't how do I stand up straighter, it was, what am I still bracing for? Realignment isn't about discipline, it's about awareness. You can't force your body into a new shape and expect it to stay. You have to listen to why it collapsed in the first place. Sometimes it's physical: weak glutes, tight hip flexors, a stiff thoracic spine. But often, it's deeper. Maybe you learned to shrink yourself to avoid conflict. Maybe you learned that being small was safer than being seen. Maybe you internalized the message that taking up space was selfish or arrogant. And now, even when you try to stand tall, your body resists, because standing tall feels vulnerable. It feels like saying, I'm here, I matter, I deserve to be seen. And for some of us, that's the scariest posture of all. She started working with a movement coach not to fix her posture, but to understand it. They didn't focus on aesthetics. They focused on sensation. What does it feel like when your ribs expand? When your feet root into the ground? When your head floats above your spine, instead of jutting forward? At first it felt foreign, almost uncomfortably. Good posture didn't feel natural because her natural had been shaped by years of compensation. But slowly, her body began to remember something older, a way of being that felt grounded, present. alive. She stopped thinking about posture as something to achieve and started experiencing it as something to inhabit. What surprised me most wasn't just how resistance bands improved my experience with postural awareness, but how everything started to feel different once I switched to the right method. I wasn't expecting such a clear change, and honestly, I tested it more than a few times before I figured out what really worked. This isn't a promotion, just sharing real results that made a noticeable difference for me. I'll leave the link below if you want to explore what I mean. The shift didn't happen overnight. Some days, she still collapsed. Still caught herself hunching. Still felt the weight of old patterns pulling her down. But now, she had a choice. She could notice the collapse without judgment, breathe, realign, and keep moving. And little by little, standing tall stopped feeling like performance. It started feeling like home. Neuroscientists at Columbia University studied this phenomenon, how postural changes influence decision-making and risk tolerance. They found that participants who sat or stood in expansive, open postures were more likely to take positive risks, make proactive decisions, and report feeling more in control of their circumstances. Those who adopted collapsed postures showed the opposite pattern: more hesitation, more avoidance, more passivity. The implications are staggering. Your posture isn't just reflecting your mental state, it's generating it. Every time you collapse, you're training your brain to retreat. Every time you align, you're training it to engage. Over time, these micro-adjustments compound. They shape not just how you feel in a single moment, but who you become over months and years. She started noticing it everywhere. In meetings, the people who spoke with clarity and conviction weren't always the most knowledgeable. They were the ones who sat upright, shoulders back, taking up space without apology. In conversations, the people who seemed most grounded weren't necessarily the calmest. They were the ones who breathed deeply, who didn't collapse when challenged. Posture wasn't about looking confident, it was about creating the internal conditions for confidence to emerge. But posture alone isn't enough. You can stand tall and still feel hollow if your nervous system is stuck in survival mode. That's why alignment has to include the breath. When you breathe shallowly, high in your chest, rapid, erratic, your body stays in fight. When you breathe deeply into your belly, slow, rhythmic, your parasympathetic nervous system activates. Your body shifts from threat response to restand, digest. Posture and breath work together. An open posture allows for deeper breath, and deeper breath reinforces alignment. Together, they create a feedback loop of safety and presence. She began building a practice around it. Every morning, before reaching for her phone, she'd stand, feet hip-width apart, spine long, shoulders soft, 3 deep breaths. That was it. No affirmations, no goals, no forcing, posy fighters. Just presence, just alignment. And from that foundation, the rest of her day unfolded differently. Not perfectly, not without challenge, but with more space, more choice, more herself. There's a line from the poet Rainer Maria Rilke that kept coming back to her. Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act. Just once, with beauty and courage. She used to think courage was loud, bold, dramatic, but standing tall in a world that had taught her to shrink. That was the bravest thing she'd ever done. Psychologists study something called proprioception, your body's sense of where it is in space. When proprioception is strong, you feel grounded, coordinated, confident. When it's weak, you feel disconnected, clumsy, uncertain. Posture is one of the fastest ways to strengthen proprioception. When you align your body, you're not just improving mechanics, you're recalibrating your sense of self. You're teaching your nervous system, I am here, I am solid, I am safe. And that message radiates outward into every area of your life. She stopped waiting for confidence to arrive before standing tall. She realized it worked the other way around. Stand tall first, breathe deeply first, align your body first, and the mind follows. Not because you're faking it, but because your body is sending your brain new information. Information that says, we're okay. We can handle this. We don't need to hide. Months later, she stood at the same mirror, same room, same reflection. But something was different. Her shoulders were back, not forced, but easeful. Her chest was open, not puffed, but present. Her gaze was steady, not hard, but clear. It wasn't that she'd become someone new. She'd just stopped apologizing for being herself. What would you do in that moment? If you realized your body had been speaking a language you'd never learned to hear. If you discovered that realignment wasn't about perfection, but about presence. Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is stop collapsing. Not because we need to impress anyone, but because we deserve to feel at home in our own skin. Tell us which country or city you're watching from, and what part of this story resonated most. See you in the next video. Bye.